The price of loving an alien. Can you trust love if it challenges everything you've been taught? What if love wasn't something found on Earth? What if it came from the farthest reaches of the universe, from a place where stars are born and galaxies collide? I thought I knew everything about love, the kind that we dream about. The love we watch in movies, the one we see in the eyes of those who walk beside us. But, what if I told you that love can tear apart the very fabric of the universe itself? It wasn't a coincidence that I met her. The moment our worlds collided, everything I believed in started to shift. She was not human, and yet, she made me feel more alive than I'd ever been. I felt something deep within my chest, a magnetic pull, something that went beyond physics, beyond reason, beyond what we were taught to believe. Zyraen, her name echoes in my mind even now. She is everything I was told to fear. Her world, her energy, everything that makes her, is alien to me. And yet, the very essence of her calls to me, a force I cannot deny. This is not just another love story. This is the story of a bond forged in the stars. A connection so deep, it defies the very laws of nature. But as our worlds collided, so did our destinies. And now, here we stand on the precipice of everything we've ever known. Facing a cosmic war, where the stakes aren't just our lives, but the very existence of everything we've ever known. What if the only way to save the universe is to risk everything? Stay with me, because this story will change everything you thought you knew about love, fate, and the power of the cosmos. Hit subscribe because this is just the beginning. You'll be one of the 1,000 first to witness a journey that will alter everything. The nebula stretched across the cosmos like an endless painting of light and color, casting a soft, violet glow across the grand structure of the Nebula Nexus station. Floating in the vast expanse of space, the station was a marvel of engineering, futuristic yet ancient, built to connect the vast corners of the universe. Its walls shimmered with the energy of countless civilizations that had passed through, and its towering spires seemed to pierce the sky, though there was no sky here, only the boundless void. Inside, the air hummed with an energy that was almost tangible. The station was bustling with activity, people from every race and species converging to share knowledge, resources, and, at times, secrets. A place of unity. A place of tension. Amidst the silence of the great station, Cole stood, his posture perfect as he surveyed the chaotic beauty of the universe through the massive viewing windows. His muscles flexed under his high-tech, form-fitting suit, the sleek black material designed for both mobility and defense. The constant hum of the station's power system seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. He had been trained for this moment, this mission. Protect the station. Protect the unknown. But what he hadn't prepared for was Zyraen. She appeared as if from nowhere. Her presence was a shift in the very air, a disruption of the station's hum. Her striking form seemed to glow against the backdrop of distant stars, every movement purposeful and elegant. Her skin, a rich emerald hue, shimmered under the artificial lights of the station. Her eyes, large and luminous, glowed a brilliant purple, almost as if the stars themselves had taken residence within them. Zyraen was unlike anyone Cole had ever seen. Her elegance was matched only by an unsettling, magnetic pull that seemed to draw him in. He couldn't explain it, didn't want to explain it, but as she moved across the vast room, he felt something stir deep inside him. She was a being from Virella, a planet on the other side of the galaxy, a place shrouded in mystery. He had read reports, heard stories, but seeing her in person, it was like meeting the myth itself. As she stepped closer, the air seemed to crackle. The hum of the station, the chatter of the crowd, the gentle sound of the machinery, they all faded into the background. It was as if the universe itself had paused, holding its breath. Zyraen's gaze met his, and the connection was immediate. "Human," she spoke, her voice soft yet undeniable, as though it reached into his very core. "Do you feel it?" Cole's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know if it was the way her words reverberated through him, or the way her presence seemed to fill the space around them. But he could feel something otherworldly, something that tied him to her. He nodded, unsure of how to respond. His breath was shallow, his mind racing. He had never encountered anyone like her, not like this. There were stories of aliens, tales told by governments, by scientists, by historians, but nothing had prepared him for the reality of standing face to face with someone like Zyraen. She took a step forward, her movements graceful and fluid, as if she were gliding. Her long, platinum hair cascaded over her shoulders, almost glowing in the dim light. As she walked, her form seemed to draw him closer, but it wasn't just her physical appearance. It was something deeper, something that reached beyond the surface, touching something primal within him. "Why are you here?" Cole asked, his voice low, a sense of urgency growing in his chest. He wasn't sure if it was the curiosity, the pull, or the responsibility he felt to protect the station. But something inside him told him that this wasn't just a casual meeting. She stopped just short of him, her presence filling the space between them. "I seek the power your species has discovered," she said, her voice almost a whisper, yet it seemed to carry across the room like an electric pulse. "Your world, it has something that can change everything. And I need it." The weight of her words hung in the air like a cloud, dense with implications. Cole swallowed, his pulse quickening. He had heard of new technologies, innovations, ways humanity had pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But to hear it from her? To feel her energy emanating from just a few feet away? Something in him stirred. It was not just a matter of technology, or duty. No, it was something deeper, something that connected him to her in ways he couldn't articulate. He took a step closer, drawn to her in a way that made his thoughts scatter. "I can help you," he said, his voice steady, though his insides were anything but. Her eyes gleamed, the purple in her irises seeming to intensify, reflecting the nebula outside the station's windows. "Can you?" she whispered, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "Can you truly help me?" Cole's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure if he could help her or if he could even survive what this encounter might lead to. But in that moment, he knew one thing for certain: their worlds, their lives, were on the cusp of a collision that would change everything. The connection between Zyraen and Cole wasn't just a mere attraction. It was something magnetic, something that neither of them could explain. As they stood there, mere inches apart, the air between them seemed to pulse with energy. It was as if the universe itself was bending around them, drawing them together despite the vast differences that separated them. Cole's heart raced, but it wasn't fear he felt. It was something deeper, an undeniable pull that seemed to emanate from Zyraen. Every time she moved, her presence sent ripples through the air, vibrating with a strange power that he could almost feel in his bones. "You're different," Cole murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. His mind was struggling to make sense of it all, her beauty, her strength, her power, but more than that, it was the energy she radiated that was drawing him in. Zyraen's eyes glowed brighter in response, the purple hues almost swirling like galaxies within her irises. "I am not just different," she replied softly. "I am from a place you cannot begin to comprehend. But I feel it too, this connection. It is more than mere attraction. It's as though our souls are aligned." Her words lingered in the air, and Cole could feel the weight of them pressing against him. It was as if she had reached inside his mind, and found something buried deep within him. There was a sense of familiarity, a deep-rooted recognition that he couldn't escape. The more he looked into her eyes, the more he felt his own body responding to hers. His muscles tensed, his breath shallow, as though the very act of standing next to her was causing a surge of electricity to flow through him. His instincts told him to step away, to keep his distance. She was an alien, after all. She wasn't from his world. But the pull, the gravitational force between them, made it nearly impossible to move. "You feel this too, don't you?" Zyraen's voice softened. Like a caress, a delicate whisper that seemed to wrap around his consciousness. "I do," Cole admitted, his voice hoarse. "I can't explain it, but every fiber of my being is drawn to you." Zyraen took a small step forward, her glowing skin catching the light. The closer she came, the more Cole could feel the heat of her energy wrapping around him like a warm current. Their connection wasn't just emotional, it was physical, a surge of power and desire that made it difficult to focus on anything else. Cole reached out instinctively, his hand hovering just above hers, unsure of what to do with the overwhelming intensity that surged between them. His heart pounded in his chest, and every nerve screamed to close the distance, to feel her presence more intimately. "Cole," Zyraen's voice broke through his thoughts, her tone softer now, but still filled with that same undeniable power. "What do we do with this? With this pull?" Before he could respond, the station around them seemed to shudder. A low hum filled the air, vibrating the very walls of the Nebula Nexus station. The power surge from their proximity was no longer something they could ignore. It was being felt by the station's systems, affecting its delicate balance. Cole could feel the tension building between them. But his hands clenched into fists, torn between the instinct to embrace the strange connection and the duty he had to remain composed, to stay focused. The magnetic pull between them was undeniable, yet dangerous. As much as Cole wanted to reach out and touch her, to explore the energy he felt flooding his veins, he knew that such a connection would come with its own set of consequences. "I think we should stop," Cole finally said, stepping back, though his body betrayed him. He wasn't sure if it was fear or caution, but he needed to regain control. He couldn't let himself get lost in this alien attraction. But Zyraen didn't back away. Instead, She stepped closer. Her eyes never left his, and the weight of her gaze sent an electric jolt through him. "We cannot stop this," she said softly. "This connection was meant to happen. Whether we understand it or not, it is our fate." The hum of the Nebula Nexus station grew louder as the connection between Zyraen and Cole intensified, vibrating through the walls of the station. It wasn't just a mere physical attraction anymore. There was something much more profound, something neither of them had the power to stop. The energy between them crackled like electricity in the air, making it difficult to focus on anything else. Zyraen's pulse quickened as she stepped closer to Cole, their proximity almost unbearable. The air around them shimmered with the invisible force that linked them. An overwhelming pull that only seemed to grow stronger as they remained near each other. Cole took a shaky breath, trying to push aside the overwhelming attraction that was rapidly taking over his senses. He could feel every inch of his body responding to her. It was as though every nerve was alive, every muscle taut, and it had nothing to do with the physical strength he had developed over the years. No, this was something else. Something raw and primal that he couldn't explain. Her skin, that soft yet electrifying emerald green, seemed to glow in the dim light of the station, creating a strange, beautiful aura around her. She reached out tentatively, her long, delicate fingers brushing against his chest. The moment she made contact, it was as if the world around them had frozen. Cole's breath hitched. Her touch sent a bolt of energy through his body, and it was more than he had ever felt before. It was like his very soul was being pulled toward her. "You feel it too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but there was certainty in her words. She stepped closer, her breath warm against his skin. "Yeah," Cole murmured, his words faltering. His hands instinctively reached for her, but then he paused, a sense of caution creeping into his thoughts. He had never experienced anything like this before. The pull between them was unexplainable, but he couldn't deny the chemistry. He could feel his heart racing in his chest, his thoughts clouded by the magnetic presence she had. "I don't know if I can control this," Cole confessed, his voice hoarse with the struggle of both attraction and fear. Fear that this power, this connection, might lead them down a dangerous path. Zyraen smiled faintly, her eyes glowing brighter, the purple hue deepening, swirling with a light that seemed to connect with his very soul. "You don't need to control it," she replied, her words soft but with a firmness that only added to the mystery. "This energy isn't something that can be controlled. It's a force beyond our understanding." The station's energy shields flickered, momentarily cutting out the lights in the room. The sudden darkness added a surreal feeling to the moment, as if the universe itself was momentarily holding its breath, waiting for the two of them to figure out what would come next. Cole reached for Zyraen, his hand finding her wrist with surprising tenderness. He felt the warmth of her skin, the pulse of her energy coursing through her veins, and it made him feel both alive and vulnerable. He could feel her energy surging, an almost tangible force that radiated from her, filling every inch of the room. His own energy, his own power, seemed to respond in kind, creating a mix of tension and intimacy between them. Without warning, the light surged back on, and for the briefest of moments, the space between them seemed to shrink. Zyraen's body leaned closer to his, her chest brushing against his. Cole felt the warmth of her, the heat of her presence, as their bodies magnetized towards one another. Her hands, now resting on his chest, felt like they were burning through the fabric of his suit. The connection was undeniable, the energy between them so palpable that Cole could feel it almost physically, wrapping around him like a vine, pulling him deeper into the mystery of who she was and why this pull between them was so powerful. The desire to touch her, to close the space between them, was overwhelming, but something held him back, an unspoken fear that what they were doing might be crossing a line they couldn't come back from. "You don't have to be afraid," Zyraen whispered, her voice soft yet full of an ancient knowledge. "I'm not going to hurt you." Cole stared into her eyes, seeing the truth in them, an almost timeless sadness, like she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. But what was even more profound was the way their energy had intertwined, how he could feel his pulse in sync with hers. It was as if they were meant to be here, together, in this exact moment, crossing a boundary that neither of them could resist. "I know," Cole murmured, his fingers lightly tracing the outline of her face, feeling the smoothness of her skin, the slight hum of power that ran just beneath the surface. "But I don't know if I'm ready for this." Zyraen didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in closer, her breath warm against his ear. "Then let's take this one step at a time." Without another word, she kissed him softly at first, as though testing the waters, and then with a deeper intensity, as if they both had been waiting for this moment for eternity. Her lips, cool but electrifying, pressed against his, sending a shock wave of heat through his body. He responded without hesitation, pulling her closer, his hands cradling her face as the world around them seemed to disappear. The energy between them surged, rising to a crescendo that was both thrilling and terrifying. For a moment, Cole forgot where they were. He forgot about the dangers of their connection, the complexities of their worlds. All that mattered was the feeling of her in his arms, the taste of her kiss, and the knowledge that, no matter how different they were, they had found something real in each other. The energy between Zyraen and Cole was undeniable. And yet the magnitude of it threatened to tear them apart in ways neither could foresee. After that kiss, neither of them could return to normal, as if a spark had been lit that neither could extinguish. They stood there, close, but unsure of what came next. The station around them hummed, but it felt distant, irrelevant in comparison to the intensity of what they were experiencing. Zyraen's breath was shallow as she stepped back just slightly, her eyes locking with Cole's. The bond they had forged felt fragile now, as if it might unravel if either of them spoke the wrong words, did the wrong thing. "I don't know what this is," Cole whispered, still reeling from the force of the kiss. His heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline of the moment still buzzing in his veins. Zyraen, for the first time, seemed uncertain, a flicker of vulnerability in her usually steady demeanor. "It's more than what either of us can understand. This connection," she trailed off, as if searching for the right words. "It's forbidden." Cole frowned. "Forbidden? From who?" "From my people," she said softly, the sadness in her voice barely masked. "From your world. From the universe itself." Cole's brow furrowed as he took another step toward her. His hand reached for hers, gently threading their fingers together. "Why?" Zyraen's face softened as she gazed at him, but there was an unmistakable sadness behind her eyes. Because it's dangerous. People like me, beings from Virella, have never been allowed to bond with humans. Our worlds were never meant to merge. Our energies, they're too powerful when combined. The weight of her words sank into Cole, but it didn't scare him. If anything, it only made him more determined. The pull between them was undeniable. It was as if every fiber of his being was woven into hers, and every passing moment made it more and more impossible to ignore. "We're already bonded," Cole said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "You felt it too? I'm not afraid of whatever power this is. I want to understand it with you." Zyraen looked up at him, her eyes deep pools of purple that seemed to glimmer with a truth he couldn't quite grasp. She took a deep breath, almost as if preparing herself for something. But before she could respond, the sudden, sharp screech of the station alarms filled the air, breaking their moment of intimacy. Both of them looked toward the main control center, where red emergency lights flashed ominously. "What's happening?" Cole asked, immediately on alert. Zyraen's expression hardened, and her body tensed, as if instinctively preparing for danger. "Something is coming. We're not alone anymore." The ship shook beneath them, and Cole felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. There was no doubt now something was coming for them. "Stay close to me," Zyraen whispered, her voice filled with urgency, but also a sense of protectiveness that Cole had never heard before. With no more time to question what was happening, Cole followed her as she led him to the central command room. The station's systems began to overload, and flashes of strange light filled the corridor, throwing harsh shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. In the command room, the view screens began flickering, and the image of massive alien ships appeared on the screens, their dark silhouettes blotting out the stars behind them. Cole's heart skipped a beat. These weren't just any ships. These were the forces Zyraen had warned him about, the very same ones that had followed her to Earth. The ones that knew her secret. "They've come to stop us," Zyraen said with a note of regret in her voice. "To stop what we've started." The alien ships outside the station began to move closer, their massive forms looming like shadows against the backdrop of the universe. The hum of energy grew louder, the tension thick in the air. Zyraen stepped forward, her hands raised slightly, and energy began to crackle around her, her eyes glowing even brighter. Her power surged, rippling through the room. "I can't let them stop this." Cole stepped closer to her, reaching out to touch her shoulder. "What are you going to do?" She turned to face him, her expression both fierce and vulnerable. "We fight. Together." Suddenly, the station shook violently as the first blast from the alien ships hit the station's shields. The room jolted, and sparks flew from the control panels. The shields around them flickered but held steady for now. Zyraen moved swiftly, her fingers tracing intricate patterns in the air. Her energy swirled and expanded around her, as though the station itself was responding to her command. Cole could feel the energy building, growing stronger, pulsing through his body. She turned to face him, her eyes filled with determination. "Are you ready for this?" Cole didn't hesitate. He nodded, stepping closer to her, his heart pounding, not just from the battle ahead, but from the connection they had forged. I was born ready. The chaos surrounding the Nebula Nexus station was overwhelming. The booming vibrations of the incoming blasts reverberated through the walls, and the emergency alarms continued to blare, echoing through the vast corridors of the station. Zyraen's energy was rising to a fever pitch, her powers thrumming with intensity as she pushed the station's defensive shields to their limits. But even with all the force she could muster, the threat from the alien ships was too great. The sheer size of the ships was staggering, and their firepower was unlike anything Cole had ever witnessed. He could feel the tension building, both in the air and within himself. His muscles were tensed, his breath shallow, as adrenaline surged through his veins. He had always been prepared for physical combat. He'd trained for years, pushing his limits. But this was something completely different. The energy between him and Zyraen wasn't just physical. It was cosmic, and it was binding them together in ways he couldn't fully grasp. Zyraen's eyes locked with his, her face a mask of determination and focus. "I need you with me," she said, her voice calm but urgent, like the calm before a storm. "We cannot let them break through." Cole nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I'm with you," he said, his voice unwavering. He stepped closer to her, his hands instinctively reaching out to touch her arm. Her skin was cool to the touch, but the energy flowing through her felt alive, as if it was pulsing with the very essence of the universe. Together, they stood at the command center, their hands linked, and the world outside them seemed to disappear as they focused on the task at hand. Zyraen's energy surged once more, this time wrapping around Cole like an invisible current. He could feel her power intertwining with his own, and for a brief moment, it felt like they were one. His own abilities, his strength, his speed, his connection with the technology around him seemed to sharpen, and he could sense that same energy that had drawn him to her now coursing through his body. "Focus on the systems," Zyraen instructed, her eyes glowing bright with intensity. "We need to stabilize the shields and redirect the energy from the core." Without hesitation, Cole reached out, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface that flickered in front of him. The system hummed in response, but it wasn't enough. The alien ships outside were getting closer, their fire growing stronger. He could feel the immense pressure building. Every pulse, every second, stretched the limits of the station's defenses. And then, Zyraen's voice broke through his thoughts. "Cole, focus. We need to merge our energy completely." His eyes flicked up to hers, and he saw the truth in her gaze. There was no more time for hesitation. They were in this together. And together, they were powerful. He extended his hand toward her, his fingers brushing lightly over hers. Immediately, a spark of energy shot through him, more intense than anything he had ever felt before. Her touch was electric literally, and his body responded to it instinctively. The connection was instantaneous, and for a moment, everything else seemed to fade. Cole closed his eyes for a second, allowing himself to fully experience the rush of energy flowing between them. Her power was intoxicating, filling him with strength and clarity. It wasn't just about fighting back the alien ships. It was about survival, about understanding what this connection meant for them both. As their energy merged, they became something more. The room around them seemed to ripple with the force they were generating, the air thick with a palpable charge. "I'm ready," Cole said, his voice steady. His heart was racing, but it wasn't fear. It was a deep, resonating certainty that no matter what happened next, they could face it together. Zyraen's lips curved into a faint smile, the power in her eyes softening just slightly. "Then let's do this." The moment they merged their energies, the station's systems came alive. The holographic displays around them began to pulse with new, intense light as the energy from their bond flowed into the station's core. It was an act of pure synergy, a fusion of their individual abilities that created something far greater than they could have accomplished alone. The shields around the station flared to life, the light blinding in its intensity as it repelled another incoming blast from the alien ships. The force of their energy sent shockwaves rippling outward, causing the enemy ships to momentarily falter. It wasn't enough to defeat them, but it was enough to buy them time. Zyraen turned toward Cole, her face illuminated by the light of their combined energy. "We have to hold them off until we can disrupt their systems." Without hesitation, Cole followed her lead. He was still reeling from the raw power they had just unleashed, but he couldn't focus on that now. He had one goal: to protect her, to protect the station, and to survive. But just as they began to stabilize the station's systems, a loud crash rattled the walls, followed by a screeching noise as the outer hull of the station was breached. Zyraen's eyes widened, but there was no fear in them, only the calm certainty of someone who had faced impossible odds before. She turned to Cole, her voice sharp. "They've found a way inside." The door to the command center burst open, and a horde of alien soldiers stormed in, their weapons drawn, their presence overwhelming. Zyraen stepped in front of Cole, her body glowing with energy, ready to protect him with every ounce of her being. But Cole didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his superhuman strength making him a formidable force. He surged forward, using his speed and agility to knock the first alien soldier back. He could feel the surge of energy between him and Zyraen, and it made him stronger than ever. Together, they fought back, a seamless union of strength and energy, facing down the alien threat as a team. And despite the overwhelming odds, Cole felt an undeniable truth rising within him. This bond between him and Zyraen, it was their greatest weapon. The battle was relentless. Zyraen and Cole fought side by side, their movements fluid and synchronized as though they had been doing this their entire lives. Each blast from the alien soldiers was met with a counterattack, each strike of energy from Zyraen was mirrored by Cole's strength. Together, they were an unstoppable force, yet the enemy was endless. The alien soldiers, tall and imposing, moved like shadows across the command room, their strange, insect-like features adding to the terror of the moment. Their armor gleamed with a dark sheen, reflecting the chaos that erupted around them. Each movement, each strike, echoed with a sound that felt too unnatural, too foreign to be real. Cole's body surged with adrenaline, but even he couldn't ignore the exhaustion building in his limbs. He had fought countless battles before on Earth, on training fields, in simulations, but this was different. This wasn't just about skill or power. It was about survival, about protecting the bond between him and Zyraen. Zyraen, however, seemed to be tapping into a well of energy Cole could barely comprehend. Her eyes, glowing with the intensity of the fight, shifted from deep purple to an almost blinding, ethereal white as she channeled all her energy into each strike. Her powers were endless. Her ability to heal had saved them both more than once during the skirmish, her energy swirling around them like an invisible shield. But despite the intensity of their combined efforts, the enemy was still pressing forward, pushing them back. With each passing moment, it became clear, they were outnumbered, and the station's defenses were quickly becoming overwhelmed. The alien soldiers had a leader, and it wasn't long before he revealed himself. The commander, towering above the others, emerged from the shadows. His armor was adorned with strange runes, and his eyes cold, calculating, burned with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what was at stake. "You cannot win," the commander's voice echoed, reverberating through the walls. "The bond you share, it is unnatural. You are weakening the fabric of this universe." Zyraen's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a small, knowing smile. "Perhaps it is the universe that is weak," she replied, her voice calm but laced with a deep power. "Perhaps it's afraid of what happens when two worlds unite." The commander took a step forward, his armored boots thudding heavily against the floor. And for a moment, time seemed to slow down. His cold gaze shifted between Cole and Zyraen, as if calculating their every move. Zyraen turned her gaze to Cole, her expression softening for a moment. It was a fleeting glance, one that spoke volumes in silence. The bond between them, the connection they shared, was more than just physical. It was deep, a spiritual connection that, despite everything, was the one thing they had in common. Cole's heart swelled as he locked eyes with her. His love for her, it wasn't just about the attraction, the magnetic pull they felt in each other's presence. No. This was something deeper, something that connected them in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. "Together, we can stop this," Zyraen whispered, her hand reaching for his. And in that moment, the energy between them pulsed with a new intensity. It was more than just power. It was love, a raw force of nature that was untouchable by anything the universe could throw at them. Cole didn't hesitate. His fingers intertwined with hers. And immediately, the world around them seemed to shift. The energy that surged between them was so powerful it seemed to rip through the walls of the station. The bond was tangible now, an undeniable force that connected them both, not just through touch, but through everything they were. The commander, sensing the change, raised his weapon. "No," he shouted. "You will not defy the order of the cosmos." But Cole and Zyraen were beyond the laws of the cosmos. Together, they merged their energies once more, the combination of their strengths creating a force that could not be contained. A blinding light enveloped them, casting shadows and brilliance across the room in a dazzling display. The entire station shook as their combined power erupted, the very fabric of the space around them warping with the intensity of it all. For a moment, the universe itself seemed to pause. An eerie stillness filling the air before the shock wave of energy exploded outward. The alien soldiers were thrown back, their armor crumpling under the pressure of the wave. The commander fell to the ground, his weapon slipping from his grasp as he was knocked unconscious by the sheer force. Cole and Zyraen stood, their breathing heavy, their bodies exhausted. But the feeling of their energy still intertwined, still pulsing between them, was undeniable. They had done it. They had repelled the invasion. But the price was steep. Cole's knees buckled, his strength waning as the rush of energy began to ebb. Zyraen, too, seemed weakened, though she remained standing, her hands still firmly clasped around his. A moment of silence passed between them. The world was still. The battle was over for now. Zyraen looked at him, her face softening. You're incredible," she whispered. Cole smiled faintly, his vision blurred from exhaustion. "We make a good team." Her eyes gleamed, the purple light dimming just slightly. "No. We make a perfect team." As they both stood there, in the heart of the wreckage they had caused, the space between them seemed to shift once more. It wasn't just the aftermath of a fight that connected them. It was the intimacy of shared power, the sacrifice of uniting worlds, and the promise of what was yet to come. The Nebula Nexus station was silent. Its once bustling corridors now eerily still. The alien invasion had been repelled, but the cost was high. Cole and Zyraen stood in the heart of the command room, their bodies still connected by the invisible threads of their shared energy. Despite their victory, there was no sense of triumph. Just an overwhelming, quiet exhaustion. Cole's breath was shallow, and his muscles ached from the intensity of the battle. But more than the physical toll, it was the emotional weight that seemed to drag him down. He felt the presence of Zyraen beside him, her energy still interwoven with his own. Yet the reality of their situation began to settle in. "You're different," he whispered, his voice hoarse as he looked at her. He could feel her energy still radiating through him, as though it had become a part of him. "The way we fight together, the way we connect." Zyraen turned toward him, her face softening as she gazed into his eyes. The purple glow of her irises had dimmed slightly, but the intensity in them remained. "I told you, Cole," she said gently, her voice a soothing contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. "This bond between us, it's not just about power. It's about something deeper." Her hand reached up, brushing against his cheek with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the battle they had just fought. The warmth of her touch sent a surge through him. But this time, it wasn't the electricity of battle, it was something more intimate. Something that made his heart skip a beat. Cole closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to fully absorb the feeling of her touch. He felt the pull of her, that magnetic energy they shared. But it wasn't just attraction anymore. It was something far more profound. "I feel it too," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "But this isn't just about attraction. There's something more, something I don't fully understand. Something I didn't expect." Zyraen stepped closer to him, the space between them now so small. It felt as though the universe had collapsed into this one moment. "Sometimes, the most unexpected things are the most powerful," she said, her words heavy with meaning. "Our connection, it isn't just physical. It's spiritual. It's fate." Cole's heart raced, but he didn't step away. Instead, he moved closer to her, his body responding to the energy that swirled between them. His hand found hers once again. And this time, there was no hesitation. There was no fear. There was only understanding. "I don't want to walk away from this," he said, his voice firm. But there was a vulnerability in it that made it clear he wasn't sure what would come next. "I don't want to lose this connection." Zyraen smiled softly, the sadness in her eyes momentarily fading. "You won't lose me," she said, her voice tender. "But we both have to accept the consequences of this bond. It's not just our hearts that are connected, it's our souls. And that means there will be challenges ahead." Cole nodded, but even as he absorbed her words, he couldn't deny the deep, unwavering pull he felt toward her. The universe had tried to separate them, had tried to tear them apart. But nothing could stop what had already been set into motion. He looked at her, the weight of their situation settling in. "I can't pretend I know what to do with this," he said, his voice rough. "But I know one thing, I'm not afraid to explore it. I want to see where this goes." Zyraen's smile deepened. And for the first time, there was a hint of hope in her expression. "Then let's take this one step at a time," she said softly. But just as they seemed to be reaching a moment of clarity, the station's alarms flared again. The red lights flashing, signaling the arrival of yet another threat. This time, it wasn't just the alien fleet. It was something far worse. Something that would test everything they had fought for. The large viewing screen flickered to life, showing a vast expanse of space. The image was blurry at first. But as it cleared, the true horror became visible. A massive ship, more advanced and more terrifying than anything they had ever seen, was approaching. It was a battle cruiser, its design sleek and menacing. And it was headed directly for them. "They've sent reinforcements," Zyraen said, her voice hardening as she looked at the screen. "And they're not here for negotiations." Cole's body tensed. He was no stranger to battle, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. The ship that approached was beyond anything he could have imagined. Their energy would need to be stronger, more focused, to face this new threat. "We need to act quickly," Cole said, determination surging through him. "We can't let them break through again. This time, we fight back together, and we finish what we started." Zyraen stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the screen. "This time, we will win. No more hesitation. Together, we are unstoppable." Cole nodded, stepping beside her, their bodies still humming with the energy of their bond. It was more than just physical strength now. It was spiritual. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for each other. As the massive ship drew closer, the energy between them intensified. Cole could feel it, like a spark that would soon explode into a raging fire. They were ready to take on whatever came next. The atmosphere around the Nebula Nexus station grew tense as Zyraen and Cole prepared for what was inevitably coming, the battle of their lives. The ship on the viewing screen grew closer with each passing moment, its dark, intimidating shape stretching across the stars. The battle cruiser, enormous and seemingly unstoppable, was closing in. Its massive energy shields were visible now, as were the advanced weaponry mounted on its surface, ready to unleash destruction. Zyraen and Cole stood side by side, the weight of their bond pressing down on them like an unspoken promise. Their hearts were still in sync, their energies intertwined in a way that had never felt more real. They were no longer two separate beings. In this moment, they were one. "I've faced enemies before," Cole said, his voice steady but filled with intensity. "But nothing like this. This isn't just about surviving anymore. This is about protecting everything we've fought for: our bond, our worlds, and the future we're building." Zyraen nodded, her gaze locked onto the screen. "I've never encountered a force like this," she admitted, her voice calm despite the turmoil swirling within. "But together, we can fight it?" The connection between them hummed, an electric undercurrent that flowed between their bodies, reaffirming that what they shared wasn't just a coincidence, it was fate. It was powerful, and it was their weapon. "We have to break through their defenses," Zyraen said, her eyes glowing with energy. "But we need to amplify our bond. Together, we can create a force strong enough to penetrate their shields." Cole reached out, instinctively taking her hand. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of energy shot through him, hotter than anything he had felt before. It was like a fire igniting within him. He could feel the power of their connection racing through his veins, feeding his every movement, his every thought. The space between them was no longer a mere distance. It was a vortex of energy, a place where their strengths merged and amplified. Zyraen was the catalyst, and Cole was the anchor. Together, they were a force that could reshape the fabric of the universe itself. "Let's make it happen," Cole said, his voice filled with newfound resolve. Zyraen's lips curled into a faint smile, and for the first time, there was a lightness in her gaze. She stepped closer, her energy radiating like a beacon. "Ready," she whispered, her words charged with anticipation. Without another word, they turned to face the incoming enemy. The massive ship loomed ever closer, and the alarms blared, signaling that the shields around the station were nearing failure. The energy of their bond swelled, cascading around them like a protective aura. Zyraen raised her arms, and Cole mirrored her movements. They extended their powers in unison, pushing forward together with a force that made the very air hum. The station's energy core flared to life, responding to their combined strength. The pulse of energy that surged outward from them was so intense it reverberated through the entire station, shaking the walls and floors with the force of their bond. Outside the station, the alien battle cruiser continued to approach, but as it neared the shields, it suddenly stopped. Its engines stuttering, its weapons going dark. The energy from Zyraen and Cole was overwhelming, and the cruiser's shields began to crack under the sheer intensity of their combined force. Cole's heart raced, but his focus was absolute. Zyraen's power was flowing through him, amplifying everything within him, heightening every sense, every instinct. Together, they were a force beyond imagination, a unity that could not be stopped. Zyraen's voice came softly, yet firmly. "We need to break through their core." Cole didn't hesitate. With a deep breath, he focused all the power surging through him into a single, concentrated force. The air around them vibrated as the station's defenses powered up. Suddenly, there was a loud crack, followed by a deep, resonating boom that shook the very fabric of space itself. A pulse of energy erupted from the station, sending a shock wave of force outward, directly at the alien ship. The shields surrounding the cruiser collapsed, and the ship was pushed back, its engines sputtering under the force. The alien soldiers on board were thrown into disarray, their control systems scrambling as they fought to regain control. But it was too late. In the command room, Zyraen and Cole held their ground, their bodies glowing with the energy they had just released. The room was alive with power, the air crackling as their bond reverberated through the station. They stood there, facing the stars, knowing that the battle wasn't over yet, but for now, they had won. But as the ship fell back, a new figure appeared on the screen, the leader of the alien forces. The screen flickered, and the face of a dark, imposing figure appeared, his eyes glowing with a cold, calculating intensity. "You think you have won?" The voice was deep, resonating with a power that made the station's lights flicker. "This battle may be over, but the war has only just begun." Zyraen's eyes darkened as she stepped forward, her voice calm but full of determination. "We'll be ready. Together, we are unstoppable." The figure on the screen smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only coldness. "We'll see about that." The silence in the command room was heavy. The energy from the earlier battle still hummed in the air. But there was a different kind of weight now. The room was still, and Zyraen and Cole stood facing the viewing screen. Where the alien leader had just appeared, his dark eyes glowing with a cold intensity. The smile that twisted his lips only heightened the sense of impending danger. But it wasn't the alien forces that made Cole's heart race now, it was the uncertainty in his chest. The gnawing question that had begun to haunt him. "Do you think we're ready?" he asked, his voice soft, almost unsure. Zyraen turned to him, her eyes glowing faintly with energy. But there was a vulnerability in them too. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, feeling the bond that connected her to Cole. It was deeper now than ever before. It was more than just a physical connection, it was a soul connection. The pull between them had grown intense, and the love they shared was more powerful than anything either of them had ever known. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice low and steady. "But I know one thing: together, we can face whatever comes next. We have to." Cole met her gaze, his heart heavy with the truth of her words. He knew what they were about to face wouldn't be easy. The battle was far from over, and the alien forces would only continue to challenge them. But what really weighed on him wasn't the external war, it was the war inside him. Their bond was growing stronger, but it was still foreign. It was a connection that defied every law he had ever known, biologically, emotionally, and spiritually. Every part of him had been trained to understand human relationships, but this was something new. This was something he didn't fully understand, and that uncertainty felt like a constant tug at his chest. "I'm not scared of the enemy out there," Cole admitted, his voice quieter this time. "But I'm scared of what we're becoming. What if this bond changes us forever? What if we lose ourselves in it?" Zyraen reached out, gently placing her hand on his arm, grounding him. "This bond has already changed us, Cole. It's made us stronger, more connected. We are no longer just two separate beings, we are one. The fear you feel, it's part of this journey. We've both stepped into the unknown. But we're not alone in this. We'll figure it out together. Cole swallowed hard, taking in her words. The weight of them settled into his chest. She was right. They had already chosen this path, and there was no turning back. But would they be able to survive it? The strength of their bond, their love, was undeniable. But would it be enough to protect them from the consequences of their connection? As if to answer his unspoken question, the station's alarm systems flared once more, signaling that the alien battle cruiser had returned. The screen flashed with the image of the ship, now looming far too close for comfort. The alien leader's face appeared again, his smile still present, as though they were merely playing a game. "You may have won this round," the alien commander's voice echoed across the station. "But you cannot escape what is coming. The universe itself will rise against you." Zyraen stepped forward, her face hardening with resolve. "You underestimate us. We will not be broken." Cole joined her, stepping into her space, his hand resting on her back. He could feel the warmth of her energy, her strength radiating through him. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for who they were becoming, for what they could achieve together. "We've already defied the odds," Cole said with conviction, his voice clear and steady. "We'll keep defying them. For us, for this bond." Zyraen nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Together, we're unstoppable." The Nebula Nexus station was still, the aftermath of the battle echoing in the quiet corridors. The alien threat had been repelled, but the station felt heavier than before. Cole and Zyraen stood in the command room, side by side, their connection stronger than ever. But a new weight had settled on their shoulders. The rift that had brought them together was still open, its cosmic energy pulsating around them. But this time, they could sense that the universe was not merely a witness, it was a participant. The very fabric of reality seemed to be reacting to their bond, and in the quiet moments, they could feel its pull. Its insistence that they face a decision far greater than the fight they had just survived. Cole turned toward Zyraen, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and uncertainty. The moment between them was charged with everything they had been through, with everything they had shared. "We won," he said, his voice steady, though his heart raced in his chest. "But now what?" Zyraen met his gaze, her purple eyes glowing with an inner light. "Now, we face the consequences of our bond." It was a statement, not a question. But it lingered in the air between them, unspoken yet profound. They had merged their energies, had defied both the physical and emotional limits of their worlds. But now, they had to deal with the ramifications. The universe had shifted, and so had they. "I don't know if I'm ready for what comes next," Cole admitted, his voice quieter now. His thoughts swirled in confusion. His heart longed for Zyraen, but the enormity of their bond was overwhelming. It wasn't just about love, it was about existence. "We've changed everything by being together. What does that mean for us?" Zyraen took a step toward him, the glowing energy around her dimming just slightly, her form softening. "It means that what we've created is more than just a union of two people. It's a fusion of worlds. A bridge between the unknown and what's possible." Cole's brow furrowed as he absorbed her words. His chest tightened, and he could feel the deep pull in his soul, a magnetic force that anchored him to her. This bond wasn't just a moment of passion, it was destiny. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zyraen placed a hand gently on his chest. Feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her touch, she could feel her own pulse racing in response, their energy intertwined so deeply now that it was hard to distinguish where one ended and the other began. "Now, we take a step forward," she said softly. "We can't undo what we've done. We can only accept it, and move toward what comes next." Suddenly, the station's communication systems flared to life, cutting through the heavy silence. The screen blinked on, revealing an image of a familiar face. The alien leader, the one they had faced earlier, was back. This time, there was no smug smile, no cocky arrogance. Instead, his face was grim, cold, calculating. "I warned you," he said, his voice low, carrying a sense of foreboding. "You have disrupted the cosmic balance. What you've done cannot go unpunished. The universe is not meant to be altered in such a way." Zyraen's eyes narrowed, the faintest flicker of anger crossing her face. "You speak of balance, but you know nothing of what we've done. You think we've disrupted the universe, but we've redefined it." Cole stepped forward, his hands still intertwined with Zyraen's, his voice filled with determination. "We didn't do this for you, or anyone else. We did it for us." The alien leader's expression darkened. "You will pay the price for your arrogance. The forces I command are unlike anything you can imagine. This ends here." Before Zyraen or Cole could react, the screen flickered, and the entire station shuddered violently. The cosmic rift that had once served as the bridge between their worlds now tore open further, expanding and sucking the very air out of the room. "We need to stop it," Zyraen said, her voice sharp with urgency. "We need to close the rift before everything collapses." The room around them started to collapse in on itself. The air grew dense, thick with energy, as the very fabric of space was being pulled apart. The alien leader had done something that pushed their connection beyond its limits. The power of the rift surged, feeding off the energy that Cole and Zyraen had created together. Zyraen's eyes glowed with the brightest light they had ever seen. She stepped closer to Cole, her hand reaching out to touch the rift. As she did, the energy around them shimmered, and Cole could feel his energy being drawn into it, being pulled. The force was overwhelming, but he didn't pull away. He stepped forward, joining her as they stood together, their energies combining to fight back. "This is it," Cole said, his voice filled with resolve. "We either close the rift together, or we let it destroy everything." Zyraen nodded, and for the first time, there was no hesitation. She clasped Cole's hand, her eyes locked on his. The energy between them flared one last time, a brilliant light expanding from their combined forces, pushing against the rift. The space around them began to tear, but their will was stronger. For a moment, everything felt like it was collapsing. The rift was too strong. The universe itself seemed to be bending. But as they continued to focus, their energy slowly began to pull the rift back together. The light from the rift flickered, dimming, as they poured everything they had into closing it. The battle with the alien forces outside seemed insignificant now. This wasn't just about the war, it was about their future, about survival. Finally, with a surge of energy that shook the entire station, the rift snapped closed. And then, there was silence. The Nebula Nexus station had fallen silent once again. The battle with the alien forces seemingly over. The once deafening hum of alarms was now replaced by the gentle whir of cooling systems, and the subtle crackling of residual energy still echoing through the station's vast halls. The rift was gone, closed, contained, sealed by the combined will of Zyraen and Cole. But the silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was unsettling. The weight of the events that had unfolded, the energy they had channeled together, was too much to fully comprehend. There was no easy victory here. No triumph. The tension between them, palpable even after the battle, was a quiet storm. Cole stood by the observation window, his eyes fixed on the stars. The view outside was breathtaking, the darkness of space dotted with distant stars. But his thoughts were far from the beauty before him. He could feel the hum of Zyraen's presence beside him, her energy still lingering in the air like an invisible tether, pulling him toward her. Yet there was something he couldn't shake, a gnawing feeling in his chest. "We stopped it," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "We actually stopped the rift from destroying everything." But Zyraen's voice interrupted his thoughts, soft and steady. "But you're wondering about the price, aren't you?" Cole turned to face her. Her irises glowed faintly, the light within them matching the energy that flowed between them. She stepped closer, her movements graceful, almost ethereal, yet her presence grounded him. "I don't know what I'm feeling anymore, Zyraen," Cole confessed, his voice raw with emotion. I thought when we closed the rift, when we defeated the alien forces, that it would be over. But it's not. Not for me. Not for us." Zyraen nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I understand. The bond between us. It's something new. And the universe, our universe, is not used to what we've become. Neither are we. But we can't undo it, Cole. We can't turn back time." For a moment, there was nothing but the shared silence between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Their love was something neither of them could deny. But there was also the undeniable reality of what that love meant. It wasn't just about them anymore, it was about the forces of nature, the balance of everything. They had altered the course of their worlds, and with that change came consequences. "Do you think we can really make this work?" Cole asked, his voice quiet. "I mean, we're from different worlds. Different lives. We were never supposed to be together. And yet, here we are." Zyraen's lips curled into a soft, almost knowing smile. She reached out, placing her hand gently on his chest. "Together, we have done things no one thought possible. The very fabric of reality shifted when we merged our energies. But that doesn't mean we can't create a future. A future for us. For our worlds." Her words were like a balm to his soul, soothing his doubts. Yet the weight of them lingered in the air. They had created something beautiful, something beyond what either of them had ever dreamed. But the question remained, what was the future? Just then, the station's communication system came to life again. The alien leader's face appeared on the screen, his expression no longer smug, but cold. The same deep, rumbling voice filled the room. You may have closed the rift, but the balance is still disrupted. You have opened a door that cannot be closed. The forces at work will come for you both. You have altered the order of the universe, and the consequences will be more than you can withstand. Zyraen's eyes hardened, but there was no fear in them. She had faced enemies far worse than him, and her connection with Cole had only made her stronger. We've already faced your forces, and we're still standing. Whatever comes next, we'll be ready. The leader's cold smile twisted further, his eyes glinting. Then let us see just how ready you truly are. The communication cut off abruptly, leaving the air thick with tension. For a moment, neither of them moved. The enormity of what had just been said hung between them. But the weight wasn't just in the words, it was in the feeling of what was to come. We can't just wait for the universe to decide our fate, Cole said, his voice rising with determination. We have to fight for our future. For us. Together. Zyraen nodded, the energy in her eyes burning brighter now. We will. But we cannot do it alone. The universe, it's alive, Cole. It's a vast, living thing, and it's reacting to our bond. Cole's hand gripped hers, his heart beating in rhythm with hers. He could feel the power coursing between them, the strength they had built together. But it wasn't enough. He knew that. They needed more than just love. They needed to forge their path. Let's fight back, he said, his voice firm. Let's make sure this bond doesn't just change the universe, it saves it. Zyraen smiled, and it was a smile that made him feel like anything was possible. We're ready. The universe may try to break us, but together, we'll change everything. Together, they stood side by side, their energy intertwined. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something far greater. A future they could create, together. The weight of the universe itself pressed down on Zyraen and Cole as they stood together. Their bodies united by an energy so powerful it seemed to ripple through the very air around them. The alien leader's threat still hung in the air like a specter, but neither of them wavered. They had come too far to be intimidated now. Their bond, something neither of them fully understood but both cherished, had already proven stronger than any enemy. The station's alarm sounded once again, piercing the tense stillness. The alien fleet had begun to form up outside, their massive ships dark shapes in the distance. But what Cole and Zyraen couldn't see was the unseen force, the very fabric of the universe itself that was responding to their bond. The rift was still open, its energy pulsing, a reminder of the cost of their connection. It wasn't just their lives at stake anymore, it was everything. We don't have much time, Zyraen said, her voice low but steady. They're gathering forces. The universe itself is trying to pull us apart, to break us down. The rift we closed was just the beginning. Cole turned to her, his hands gripping the console in front of him, his knuckles white. He could feel her power, feel the tug of it deep in his chest, but it was something else he felt too. Something more subtle but just as undeniable. The pull of their bond, a force that threatened to overwhelm them. Could they withstand it? "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice strained with the weight of the responsibility. He felt the pressure, the urgency, in every inch of his body. They had fought together, loved together, but the stakes now were higher than anything they had faced. Zyraen stepped toward him, her presence as undeniable as the energy that surged between them. Her hand reached out, brushing against his cheek in a tender gesture that sent a shiver through him. "Now, we face the rift once more. But we do it together. We need to combine our powers, our love, our energy. We can close it completely, but it requires both of us to reach into the core of the rift, and we have to do it in one final push." Cole's heart pounded as he absorbed her words. There was a tenderness in her touch, a depth to her gaze that made his chest tighten. He had known she was beautiful, strong, and resilient, but it was the intensity of her spirit that drew him to her most. He could feel it. This was their final test. To fight together, but also to trust each other completely. To risk everything for the love they had found. "I'm with you," he said, his voice resolute. They stood in front of the massive viewport, the alien ships visible now, their shadows looming in the distance. Zyraen raised her hands, her fingers flicking with the flickering energy of the rift that connected their worlds. Cole's heart skipped a beat as he reached out to her, his hand brushing against hers. The energy surged between them, more powerful than ever before. The rift was in front of them, a swirling vortex of cosmic energy, like an open wound in the fabric of space. It called to them, threatening to pull them in, but together they could feel it, feel the pull of the universe around them, attempting to tear them apart. "We have to close it permanently," Zyraen murmured, her voice strained as she fought to keep her focus. "We can't let this energy continue. It will destroy us if we do." Cole nodded, his eyes fixed on her, his heart pounding in sync with hers. He could feel her power, her determination, and he could feel his own heart beating just as strongly. They were linked in every possible way. There was no turning back now. With one final breath, they both raised their hands toward the rift, and the bond between them flared to life. The air around them crackled, the energy in the room expanding as their powers merged into one. Zyraen's alien energy swirled like a storm, bright and electric, while Cole's human strength pulsed with a steady, focused force. Together, they created a wave of power that surged forward, rushing into the heart of the rift, pushing back against the cosmic forces that sought to tear them apart. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The rift twisted and writhed, pushing back against them, but they stood strong. Their bond, their love was more powerful than the universe itself. The rift began to shrink, its edges curling inward as the wave of energy grew stronger, more focused. Cole and Zyraen were one now, their hearts beating in sync, their powers completely merged. With one final surge of energy, the rift collapsed, its force dissipating into the void. The universe shuddered, but then, everything went silent. The light from the rift faded, leaving nothing but the peaceful stillness of space. The alien ships in the distance had retreated, their forces no match for the power Cole and Zyraen had unleashed. They had done it. Together. For a moment, the weight of their shared victory settled over them. Zyraen's energy flickered weakly, and Cole's body was drained from the intense strain, but they were alive. They had saved each other, and in doing so, had saved the universe itself. "We did it," Zyraen whispered, her voice soft but filled with awe. Cole could barely manage a smile, his chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. His body ached, but there was a peace in his heart, a satisfaction that no enemy could ever take away. "Yeah," he said, pulling her close, his hand resting against the small of her back. "We did." The bond that had once felt like a burden now felt like a gift. The love between them wasn't just a fleeting moment, it was a force, stronger than anything they could have imagined. The universe might have tried to tear them apart, but they had built something unbreakable. "I love you," Cole said, the words slipping out easily now, as natural as breathing. Zyraen smiled, her hand gently cupping his face, the glowing energy in her eyes softening. "And I love you, Cole. I always will." They stood together in the quiet aftermath of the battle, the cosmic storm finally passing. Knowing that their bond would not only define them, it would define the future of both their worlds. Together, they had forged something greater than just a love story. They had forged a legacy. In the end, we've faced unimaginable odds. Zyraen and I have fought, not just for our lives, but for a love so profound, so unprecedented, it had the power to shatter reality itself. Together, we've pushed the boundaries of time, space, and everything in between, defying the rules that govern the universe. But as we stand at the edge of what's to come, there's a truth that rings louder than any explosion, any battle we've fought. This love isn't just about us. The universe is a vast, cold place, but love, true love, can alter everything. In our fight, we've created something no one expected. We've opened a door to a future no one can predict. A future where love transcends everything we know. Where two souls, no matter where they come from, can defy all odds. We've closed the rift, but the world we've created together is far from finished. The challenges aren't over. There's still more to face, but we are stronger now. Not just because of what we've been through, but because of what we've built together. If you felt the gravity of our journey, if you believe that love knows no bounds, then don't just watch us be part of this. Hit subscribe, like, and leave a comment, because Intergalactic Hearts is just beginning. And I promise you, you won't want to miss what comes next. So, the question I leave you with is simple. Can love really transcend everything? Can it break through the stars themselves? Maybe we'll never know for sure, but one thing's for certain. We will continue to fight for it. Thank you for being part of this story. And remember, the universe is vast, but together, we are unstoppable.